What's up, everyone? This is your host, Rem Ortega, and welcome to the Pivot Chronicles Podcast, a show where we learn how shifting in life can lead to success. If you want to share your own story, go to thepivotchronicles.com. For now, listen in and enjoy! Welcome to the Pivot Chronicles, where we learn how shifting in life can lead to success. Today, we have a very special guest, and I first found out about him from Billy Samoa's podcast, Inside Out, when I listened to the episodes about how to study thought leaders and more. From there, I started to binge watch and listen to his podcast episodes and his videos and his content. He has the wisdom of a 60-year-old man at such a young age. Personally, for me, that's what I think. And I'm just blown away. So I started recommending him to some colleagues, and at one point he became a guest on one of the shows that I work with, which is I'm so thrilled about. He is a master at public speaking and helps ambitious people become top communicators. And today, we're going to dig deep into the pivotal moments of his life and pick his brain for lessons that may also help us. Folks, let's welcome Brenden Kumarasamy. Woohoo!
Thanks for having me, Rem. It's great to be here. Great intro, also.
Thanks, Brenden. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Can we start by talking about your background before MasterTalk? So can you take us back into what your life is like before? Because as far as I know, you were majoring in something different back when you were in university. Was it accounting, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah.
Yeah, it's great memory. You got it.
Yeah, and you were also in speech contests. And yeah, so take us back to when you were still studying before MasterTalk and how you first got interested in public speaking.
Yeah, for sure, Rem. Honestly, you know the story better than I do. But yeah, you got it. So when I was in college, I never wanted to be a business owner, right? I wasn't looking to be a communication coach. I didn't even know that was a profession. So I studied to be an accountant because I was really good at math and I was really bad at everything else in my life. So I said, I was going to do numbers.
Yeah.
And then when I got to college, I started doing these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age are playing rugby or football or some other sport you probably wouldn't see me playing, I did presentations competitively. And that's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, that's what the interesting part of my story came in. I started coaching a lot of the students who were younger than me. Not because I was a great coach, but because I looked at them and I said, well, they're not going to win competitions with that voice. And I didn't really know how to coach them either. So I just started helping them for fun. And then a few years later, I ended up coaching 50 or 60 people on how to speak. And I realized that everything I was teaching the students, this is probably when I was 22, a lot of the tips I was sharing with them wasn't available for free on the internet. So I said, why don't I just make videos while I work at IBM? So I joined IBM's consulting division and I just started making videos for fun in my mom's basement. And it just turned into something I never could have imagined.
All right. So that's so interesting, because at that point you were still figuring out as well what you want for yourself, but you already know that, okay, here's something that I'm good at, and I'm just gonna try my best and try to also help other people along the way, right? So when you were working at corporate, how did you first learn or realize that, all right, so this is something that I'm so interested in. I want to put more time into it and maybe see what I can get more out of it, right? So how did you realize that point?
Yeah, for sure, Rem. So I started making videos in January 2019. It was mostly just a hobby. So I was making a video in my mom's base with the phone. I wasn't editing anything. I didn't know what a production team was. I didn't know any of that stuff. I just made a video on what I thought was useful to people. And I posted that every single week. And then I started working at IBM in April 2019. But then I was like, this life is amazing. I'm making such good money I'd never seen in my life. I was paying off our family debt. I was buying myself nice things. I was like, I don't need to quit this job. This is the life. So I was just making videos for fun. But then what happened is in September of 2019, I went to Columbus, Ohio to attend Lewis Howes' Summit of Greatness, which is an event Lewis does. Lewis is like a big podcaster. in our space. So I went, I just, he's my hero basically, because I was listening to him since I was 19 years old. So I just wanted to meet him. So I fly out to this event and I end up meeting my business partner, Vamsi Ren. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, why don't you coach people for money? You could totally turn this into a business." And it turns out I signed my first client at Summit of Greatness. I think I was charging $100 an hour back then or something. And I didn't even want to charge him. I felt so guilty of taking his money, but he really wanted me to coach him. And that's when I realized I could actually do this full time. So I took it more seriously.
Wow, that's amazing. So when you met Vamsi, how did you know that it was like how did the connection spark? Can you tell us about that story? Because I know the story, but I want the audience to like learn about it as well and share to them.
For sure, Rem. And I wish it was that interesting, but basically what happens, since you know the story, is so I met him at a 5 a.m. workout in Columbus. So how Lewis's events are structured for the audience is it's not just an event during the day. There's workouts in the morning that you can attend. And I want to make sure my reputation is clean here. I do not wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I do not wake up in the morning. I do not work out in the morning. Okay, I woke up like at 9:30 today. But the reason why I went to the workout is because I wanted to meet the people who go to the workout. I mean, who's crazy enough to go to this thing? So I attend, and it was like this NFL like Super Bowl champion who was leading this really difficult workout called the Deck of Pain, where it's like 52 cards in a deck, and you go through all 52. So 10 of clovers is like 10 burpees, 9 of hearts is 9 push-ups. So I almost died doing the workout. And the guy next to me was Vamsi. But funny enough, our conversation wasn't that interesting. It was 5 minutes. He asked me what I did, and I looked at him and I said I was a YouTuber, and he started laughing. He's like, "What are you YouTubing about?" And I said, "Communication." He was like, "Communication? This guy looks like he's 22 years old. What is he doing making videos on communication?" But we kept in touch and we got on a Zoom call after the event was over. And I just felt something that I needed to be around him. So I just asked him, "Hey, where are you going next?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to Brenden Bouchard's event in San Diego." And I booked my flights and I said, "I'm coming." And I met him again there and again in Los Angeles. And we just became partners. Yeah, it worked out.
Wow, that's so awesome. It's not all the time that you can meet like people, random people, right? That you've never met in your life. And then suddenly there's like a spark and you realize that, oh wow, we can totally, work together and there's like an opportunity here. So yeah, actually, which time zone are you in right now? Is it PST?
Eastern. Eastern.
East, Eastern. Oh, okay. Because earlier I realized that maybe the time will be different because is it like daylight savings right now or
I have
I
no idea. Well, it's 8:13 right now.
oh gotcha. Because usually it would be the opposite from where I am. So if it's usually EST, right? If it's like 8 p.m. right from where you are, it's going to be 8 a.m. from where I am. But now it's like an hour ahead, so now it's 9 a.m. So
Ah.
yeah, so I was thinking like, oh my god, is the time going to change? Are we gonna miss like the call or something? So I was checking. Yeah, I was checking, and good thing that the Calendly didn't like change the time, so I still knew that okay, this might still be the same time because it's automatic, right? So yeah, I was thinking about that since you spoke about the the time like and like waking up in the morning, and I actually have seen or listened to one episode where you talk about like morning routines, and because personally as an entrepreneur as well and someone who is online so much, who is interested in personal development, I see this all the time from other creators. Like you have to have like a morning routine, you have to wake up like 3 4 right 5 a.m. and sometimes systems that work for them may not always work for everyone. And so at some point I've tried like these productivity methods as well that didn't really work for me. And I was like miserable. I'm interested to know. Yeah, I'm interested to know like what your personal take on it is, and maybe if you've developed certain at this point, right? Because maybe you've done those episodes like way back before. So maybe at this point, like what things have you developed and discovered that really worked for you you found out maybe okay, this is better than like creating a routine like everybody else, or creating like something more, creating a morning ritual, right? So like what you have you discovered so far when it comes to that realm?
Yeah, absolutely, Ram. For me, the big idea behind morning routines is that I think you should just test everything because you're
Mm.
right. There's some people who are really successful who wake up at 3 in the morning, and there's other people who are just as successful who wake up at 10 a.m. in the morning. So everyone's different. I think the key is you want to test everything. Try the cold shower, try working out in the morning, try working out in the evening, try reading a book, try everything, and then keep the things that you really like. So I'll say what I decided to keep. But once again, to your point, it's not about people copying me. It's about saying, what do I like in Brendan's routine that I can do? So I'll give you a couple of things. One is I practice intermittent fasting, right? So I fast like 16, 17 hours a day. It really works well for me, funny enough, because when I was a kid, we couldn't afford breakfast. So I never ate breakfast anyways. So back then it was, you couldn't afford breakfast. Today it's intermittent fasting. So I liked it. I already got used to it. So it worked out well for me. That's one. The second thing is I only work out in the evenings. I work out twice a week on average. Sometimes I miss my workout, sometimes I do more, but I'll do them in the evenings. And the reason is really simple. I tried working out in the morning and it sucked because it ruined all of my energy during the day. So I was just like this every time I was in a meeting and I just hated it. So I just do that in the evening. And then the last piece is just what I eat. So I'm lucky my mom just cooks the majority of my meals. And then I'll have like a special assortment of nuts and fruits and stuff like that to stay healthy.
All right, awesome. Very simple but very helpful indeed. So, yeah, I want to go into like after the time when you met Vamsi. So, um, what do you do now, and how did that develop from when you met Vamsi, right? And how did your experiences from before impact what you wanted to pursue, right? Like how did your experience from, let's say, for example, uh, when you were in university, when you were working in corporate, so how did that impact your passion and mission right now?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts there. So the first one, Rem, is so where does my partnership look like with Vamsi today? I think Vamsi is an incredible human being. We're still business partners. We're 50-50 partners actually now. So now the business has grown quite a bit, and I owe a lot of my success to him because he's the one who gave me my first 10 clients. He basically looked at me and he said, "You can coach a lot of different people, but Indian engineers who live in the US will pay top dollar to work with you because you have the same skin color as them and they have the money to spend and they need communication because they can never make manager without you and they're already making good money." So that was the niche, but he gave me a first 10 brown engineers and that's how I grew. And now today I lead a lot of the lead gen efforts. Now I have a personal brand, so a lot of people just want to work with me. So now it's easier. That's where the business stands today. And it'll be like that for a long time. Bombs is going to be my coach forever. I think the guy's been absolutely transformational to me. That's the first part. The second part of your question, do you mind repeating the second part of your question, Rem? And I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, like how did your experiences from before, like in your partnership as well with Vamsi, impact what you wanted to pursue now, like your passion and your mission?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Rem. So experiences from the past. For me, if it wasn't for the past, I wouldn't be who I am today. So in the
Mhm.
sense that I never wanted to be a business owner. I really wanted to be an executive at IBM. That was my goal. I love stability, never want to quit. But if I never got the stability in the first place, I never would have ended up being a business owner. So it was a very important step in the journey. I think the other piece that I realized I had something is because I worked at IBM, right? So all my ideal customers work at IBM, right? They're brown engineers or executives. I actually got my first clients from IBM when I quit the company. A lot of senior level people because I understood their challenges better. So when it came time for me to start the business, I wasn't just some random guy. I knew the challenges of the technology space and I could really niche down my service just to people in tech. Obviously, I coach a wide variety of people today, but still today, tech is still a main part of the business just because I understand it. I led a lot of technology implementations for IBM globally, right? In different I worked with a lot of
Mhm.
resources, global teams in the Philippines, in India, in the US. So I understood that part and that helped me a lot. But the hardest part of that whole journey, Rem, and still to this day was the hardest decision I ever made in my life, was quitting my job to do this full
Mm.
time. It was a really stressful time for me because back then, even today, I'm the only breadwinner. I don't know if you know this, but I'm the only breadwinner for my mom and my sister, right? So I'm the one who makes the money, and we were making good money at IBM. So replacing that was a uphill battle. I was like, oh my God, how am I supposed to do this? And that was a really stressful time for me. But I made the leap, and here we are today.
All right. You're right because it's really, I think that point in your life is really the scariest when you're not sure of what's on the other side, right? But another interesting fact that you've talked about before is that um you didn't just make the leap in, right? Because I would hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I just jumped into this. I made a leap of faith. I totally didn't know what I was doing." Right? But then when you're someone who's supporting like a family and you've got a lot to lose, right? So you have to think about your opportunity cost, and that's what I like about you as well. Is you're being real that hey, I have a lot of things in the line here and I can't afford to lose that. So I'm making like strategic steps and analyzing my my opportunities here to see if this is going to work. So from your perspective, how are you able to assess like that opportunity cost, and then to just to make sure that you have a more informed decision before you really took the leap of faith.
I mean, very good observation, Reb. You're absolutely right. You know, my thought process whenever I'm talking on a podcast or just when I'm sharing ideas is I'm always talking to the average person because
Mhm.
the average person doesn't have a safety net, right? The average person makes $50,000 a year in the US. I don't know what the average would be in the Philippines, but you get the idea, right? So it's like when we're speaking to the average person, that's when our advice becomes more relatable. Whereas before, it's just like, okay, like you're hearing this motivational stuff, just jump a bridge, make the. It's like this doesn't work if I'm the only breadwinner in the family. Like, okay, if you have a wealth trust and your parents are really wealthy, yeah, sure, jump the bridge, do whatever you want to do. But in this case, it just wouldn't work. So there's actually three things I recommend before you quit your job. The first one is a 6 month emergency savings. Here's why I'm a big believer in this, Rem. If you can't save money in your corporate life, you can't save money in the business. You just can't make it work. Like if you go to zero in business, you just lose. And in my opinion, if you don't know how to save a few $1,000s aside, then you don't have the discipline to be an entrepreneur. So you need to find a way to make more money as a side hustle, etc. That's point one. Point number two, have some sales. I'm not saying you need $1 million in sales to quit your job, but I want to see at least $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 would be absolutely ideal, where you've already proven out your concept, where people are saying like, "Hey, I want to buy what you have." So before I quit, did I replace? I was making 70 grand US, I think, per year at IBM. No, actually less, 65K US. So probably 73 Canadian because I'm Canadian, right? So you have to do the conversions. So I didn't replace all of my income when I quit my job. I had made 30, and I give the numbers so it's more relatable for people. I had closed 10 clients at 3K. I'm more expensive today, but back then I was charging 3,000 for 3 months of coaching. So I had closed 10 clients before I quit. So I had made 30, 35 grand. So I wasn't dumb. Like I knew that, hey, if I'm working 60 hours a week at IBM and I'm spending 30 hours doing MasterTalk, and I'm making 30 grand. Like if I put 90 hours a week into MasterTalk, because I was nuts, right? You got to work hard. Obviously, I don't work 90 hours a week anymore, but back then I did when I was balancing my corporate life and my side hustle. I knew I could make six figures as long as I committed to it. That's number two. Have some sales in the bank. And number three would be have a clear game plan on how you're going to get the rest. So in my case, it's like, okay, close 10. If I close 10 more for the rest of the year, I'll fully replace all of my income. So have a clear plan on how to get there. I also wrote my LinkedIn content months in advance before I quit IBM. So the second I quit my job, I could start posting content right away and hit the ground running. And these are just a couple of things that people just don't do, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And also, thank you very much for putting that out there. So, there are like actionable steps and really helpful tips that people can think about. And also, because when I go into like online communities, I would see a lot of of people having, this feedback that, oh, I'm already working a job and I'm so tired to do all of the things, right? I always see that when it comes to videos as well. And I've seen like TikTok videos about, certain people who are fresh out of university or fresh out of school. They're starting their life and they're shocked to know that, oh, wow, you have to be working like this. Like, for example, if they're working in corporate and really have like limited time with your life. But then here you have like entrepreneurs or side hustlers, people who have like side hustles, who are working like 60 hours like a week, and they're just making it work, right? So with you personally, what's your, like let's say, advice, or with your personal experience, what can you say to, to maybe your old self, or to those people who are really having a hard time balancing everything, and also feel like they're too overworked? um what can you say, to people like that, or maybe to yourself before, when you were working like 60 hours a week and you feel like, you're gonna burn out at some point? So maybe if you can tell something about to yourself back then, what will you say?
Absolutely, Rem. You know, for me, there's a couple of directions we can go with that question, but I would say the most important one is if you don't understand your life's priorities, you're playing the game wrong. Because a lot of people, it doesn't matter if they work a corporate job, you're the CEO. Everyone listening to this podcast is a CEO, Rem. What do I mean by that? We're the CEO of our own life, right? So we have a certain number amount of years that we're allowed to play the game on Earth before we're all gone. So it's our responsibility to allocate how we spend our time. And our priorities in life will dictate our actions. So, for example, and I'm not saying this is something people should do. Okay, I'm the extreme example of this. If you take even 10% of what I do, you'll definitely get further. There's nobody in my network, Ram, that was surprised that I was successful, even from high school. Why is that? I'll literally list out everything I do. I don't own any pets because I know it'll cost me an extra $200 a month. I don't have a girlfriend and I won't start dating until I'm in my 30s because it's just extra expense. It's time that I have to spend. I live in my mom's basement even now that I do very well in my business because I don't want my mom to work anymore and the mortgage is 700 bucks a month. So it's like, okay, like I might as well just live here and cash flow all of that into media. And I invested 20-30% of my salary instead of moving out. I started spending a grand a month on media and that's how I made MasterTalk, the YouTube channel, really nice from the get-go. These are things that anyone can do. I didn't come from a trust fund. My parents were factory workers. But the problem is that people don't know what their priority in life was. And I made that decree in 2019. I said the number one priority of my 20s is not to get married, it's not to have kids. There's nothing wrong with those goals. It's not to have fun, it's to make Master Talk work. That was the number one priority. So because my whole life was centered around I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any of that stuff either, right? So I save even more money because I'm clear. My only weakness, by the way, is junk food. So like I'll buy a lot of junk food at the restaurant, okay, that I'll admit. But because of my priorities, of course I got the results that I did. It's the same thing with Gary Vaynerchuk, right? If his focus was just business and building the wine thing, and he was dating very little, he just had one girlfriend, and then the rest was just he just goes to jet games and he does nothing else with his life. Of course, that's the result he's going to get. I don't think anyone's surprised he became a centimillionaire. So that's really the key that I encourage people to do, Rem. Even if you're the busiest person in the world, you've already committed 30 minutes listening to this podcast. It means you have time. So I'd encourage you to take another 30 minutes at least and just slow down and ask yourself, what are my main priorities in life? And how can I align my time, my life with those priorities? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's so mind blowing. Because yeah, that's so right, because a lot of, people, even me before, I didn't really understand like what that is. And you hear this quote all the time, to find something that you're passionate about, but at the same time, how, right? And people will tell you, find something that you're passionate about that can fulfill you, so you don't feel like working. And then I found out about like ikigai. Actually, way back before I was like pursuing personal development, but I didn't really understand how it's gonna apply to my life. So at some point, I was still lost and like thinking about, oh, what do I want to pursue? Like what is my passion? Something that I can help people with and also earn at the same time, make a living out of. So yeah, so the real question I think is, how do you do that? How do you find like your passion? Like think about the time that you felt lost, or maybe for people who feel lost right now, don't know exactly what to pursue in life. So what do you think is the first step that they can take after they have started to like rank out or understand like their priorities?
100% Ram. Fantastic question. So here's the way I answer it. Because I'm not one of those gushy gushy influencers who goes like, oh yeah, jump on a rainbow and eat some chocolate and you'll find your passion. That's not the way I think about it. I really like Gay Hendricks' framework. So Gay Hendricks wrote a book called Zone of Genius, where he talks about the four quadrants of specialization. So let me walk through this really quick. The zone of incompetence, the zone of competence, the zone of genius, and the zone of excellence. So let me walk through these really quick. It's really easy to understand once you get it. What's the zone of incompetence? It's something you really hate doing, and you're also not talented at it at all. So, one example in our personal lives could be cleaning the toilet. We're not really good at it, really hate it. One example in my life is cooking. I hate at it, I hate it, I don't want to do it, and I'm terrible at it. Doesn't make sense. Zone of incompetence for Brett. Zone of competence. Zone of competence is something you don't like doing, but you're decent at it. Cleaning your room is a good example of a zone of competence. Taking out the trash. Like you don't like it, but you're not bad at it. You're okay. Now here's where things get interesting. Zone of excellence. Zone of excellence is something you're extraordinarily gifted at. So think somebody who's like an entertainment lawyer, a banker on Wall Street, a consultant at IBM. Like you're really, really good at it. You get praise from work. Everybody loves you. You get paid a lot of money, but there's something empty inside of you. There's something you're just like, this is not what I should be doing with my life. And zone of genius, as you can imagine, is all of those things put together, right? It's like you're doing something you love, you're getting paid well to do it, you get praise. But the problem, Rem, is it's really difficult to go straight to your zone of genius. Like if you had asked me when I was 12 years old, hey, Brenden, what's your passion? I would have looked at you like you're really stupid. I'd be like, what are you talking about passion? I need to get a job in accounting and provide for my mom. She's dying at a factory at $10 an hour. I don't care about passions, right? So my recommendation to anyone listening is actually very counterintuitive. It's not to find your passion. It's to find your zone of excellence. Start by finding something you're actually really talented at that you can get paid money. And for some of you, it's being an accountant like me, or it was being a plumber, it might be being an electrician, and then save extra money and use the time freedom to then find your zone of genius by trying a bunch of different things and experimenting with life.
Awesome. Wow, that's so insightful. Find your zone of excellence. So I just want to highlight that there right off the bat. And also, I know you're like a master at communication, and I want to also like ask questions about that. But I want to learn more about, like your personal development side. And also, because we've been talking about a lot about like thought leaders here, Lewis, and Vamsi, and all these other people. So I want to dig deep into, let's say that you already like have clarity for this person, they understand their priorities, and now they want to look into like people they can learn more from and who can become their role models. So when you want to be a thought leader, obviously you want to see more of the people that you find admirable, right? Of whose qualities you want to replicate. So for you, who were the first people that made it to your list, and why did you choose those role models?
Absolutely, Rem. And don't worry about communication. I talk about that in every podcast. We can skip that entirely. We can just follow with whatever you're passionate about. So that's fine. So that's the first point. The second point is let's talk quickly about why do I know so much about thought leadership? The reason is very simple that I want your audience to think about, Rem. Are you studying the people you yourself want to become? Are you studying the people that you want to become? So if you want to be a professional basketball player, you should be listening to what Kobe's saying, what Michael Jordan is saying, what LeBron James is saying. But in my case, I want to be the Michael Jordan of my industry, right? Of communication. So what do I need to do? I need to study the Michael Jordans of my industry. I need to study Tony Robbins. I need to study Ving Zhang. I need to study all these amazing people, right? I need to study Alex Hormozy, Gary Vee. So that's how I spend my time. So I'd say the main three that I study the most is probably Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Alex Hormozy right now. And it used to be Lewis Howes. I'd study him all the time. I'd listen to hundreds of episodes of his podcast. But the advice for people listening is very different. It's not necessarily to study these people. The right advice is use podcasting to your advantage. What do I mean by this? So 20, 30 years ago, Rem, if you wanted to study someone, you would have to spend 7 hours studying their book, which is very inefficient, by the way. So you'd have to sit there. The Audible didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. You had to actually read the book. And it's like exhausting. And then you get tired, you fall asleep. And then after a week, you might finish the book and you go to the next person. Whereas what's nice about podcasting is you could listen to me talk for 36 minutes and make a decision. I really like Brenden. Let me study him deeply. Or I don't like this Brenden guy. Let's skip to the next person. But that's actually really good. Because if you spend 2 hours a day listening to podcasts, let's say 2 guests a day, this is exactly what I did, Ren. For a year, you'll have studied 730 different people. Isn't that crazy? 730 different people. So what's nice is my encouragement basically is just 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day, just study a new person. And whoever resonates with you, study that person deeply. And that's why I'm grateful for you. It ended up being me in some way where you kind of found me and you said, okay, I
Yeah.
study this guy. But for somebody else who's listening, it might be some Filipino pop star
Mhm.
or something. Study that person, right?
Yeah, for sure. And also, what I really like about having like this online community and listening to podcasts as well is that even though these people are completely foreign to you, you feel like you have a sense of connection with them because of the experiences that they've shared, which is what exactly what I felt listening to Billy, listening to you, and all of the other like role models and thought leaders that I really appreciate in my life. So for you personally, did like that list evolve right now? So you mentioned you're really listening into Lewis content and now you listen to Alex Harmozy. So over time, did a lot of those people change in your list? And how did that evolve, I guess, is the question. Is it when you see something interesting about them, or is it when you have like a significant moment in your life that, things change?
Absolutely, Rem. It's a great question. I mean, technically, the right answer to your question is I'm not really removing anyone from my list. I'm studying dozens of people at the same time. It's just I don't say that publicly because it's not relatable. Like if I said, "Oh, I'm studying 35 people at the same time," everyone would listen to me and go like, "That's crazy." Like I would never do that. So I say things like, "Oh, study 3 to 4 people, Alex Serma." But the truth is, I'm still studying Lewis. I'm still studying Alex. I'm studying everybody. But the interesting part of your question is, Brenden, how are you making decisions on the new people? So I think the main idea is a mindset and a tactic. So the mindset is, it's a quote from Floyd Mayweather that I love. And the quote is, it's really hard to get up at 5 a.m. and run if you have silk pajamas. What does he mean by that? So, what he means by that quote is when you're really, really successful, that's when the problems start in your life. Because once you become successful, you start to get complacent. So, let's say I was just studying Gary Vee and I became successful. I mean, I'm not super successful now, but I'm doing well enough now where I can do this full time forever now. But it's easy for me to just go, I could just study what I have, but because I have that mindset of like, I'm successful, but I'm not where I want to be, I need to keep studying new people. And Alex is just one of those examples where he just came on the scene in the last 18 months. Like he's still very new to thought leadership. He was very famous in the gym industry, but nobody knew him like globally, just as a thought leader. So because I have that mindset of I'm not worth anything, I don't think I've made it even 0.1% of my success. So I better keep studying the people who are better than me. And Alex is just one of those people. But it's not about Alex. The next person, the next person, the next person. I'll keep studying everybody who's rising up because I want to learn from them because they're smarter than me in some way and I want to beat them at their own game eventually. So that's really the thought process is I'm always keeping an open mind and I'm always studying people. But for those of you listening, don't start there. I'm crazy. Me and Ram have already done this, so we're already on the other side of the fence. So for you listening, start with one person you really like and study just that one person deeply. So when I started my personal development journey, Ram, I only studied Lewis. I didn't know who Tony Robbins was. I didn't know who like Alex Hormozy was. I didn't know who Gary was. I actually only got introduced to those people through Lewis's podcast. So they were a guest, and I was like, "Oh, who's Tony?" And I would just listen to these people. So just study one person you really like, and for most people, it might just be you because of this podcast.
Awesome. It's going to snowball eventually, actually, as well. So, also, what I want to note is that, there's going to be like a lot of people, like, let's say with your example, like 700 people, right? That's a lot. And for sure, there's going to be a lot of insights that you're going to take from there, from them. So, the next step would be like execution, right? So personally, I'm reading like Second Brain right now. Are you familiar with the book?
I've heard of it, never read it though.
Yeah, yeah. So like it's having like a second brain, and then really knowing what to do with the information. So I want to learn from other people as well, since because I'm pretty sure that successful people, and then people like you have studied a lot of these people. So in your case, how are you able to take those information? How do you process them and organize them into something that's useful for you, something that you can easily execute?
Beautiful question, Rem. I love it. There's a quote I like to share with people: "Vision without execution is hallucination." That's what I like to say. Like you could have a big vision for the world, but if you don't execute, you're just hallucinating. You'll never get to where you want to be. So both of those components are important. And the reason I say the 730, I don't just say that because I implement that. I really listen to 730 episodes. That's why, by the way, side note, I was so confident MasterTalk was going to work, even from the beginning. And the reason is because I listened to all the communication experts on Lewis's podcast. And I listened to them. I was like, these guys are good, but they're not covering what I'm talking about. It's like they're not saying this. They're not talking about the random word exercise. They're not doing the question drills. I was like, this is so simple. Why aren't they talking about this? And I said, because I'm supposed to talk about this because I'm supposed to be a thought leader. So that's one piece. The other piece is actually, that's why I love the question, Ram. It's only something I've solved recently because I have that problem too, where I'm consuming a bunch of knowledge, but if I'm not executing it, what's the point of consuming the knowledge? So I actually invented a new strategy that I'll teach to you that you'll probably end up implementing if you like it, called Impact 3. So Impact 3 is really simple. Here's what you do. You take any thought leader, whether it's Gary Vaynerchuk, Alex Hormozy, I guess you can take me in this example. And the point is you only write down 2 to 3 key ideas per thought leader. You're not allowed more than 3 that you implement. So let's say I'm listening to a podcast of Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm going to write down a bunch of notes. But then at the bottom, I have to go, this is 1, 2, or 3. It could just be one thing that man I should do. I'll give you an example. Let's say we take Gary Vaynerchuk. He says a bunch of things about motivation and raw. That doesn't apply to me anymore because I'm disciplined. Like I do the thing. But what's the one thing from Gary? Hey, Brenden, you're posting once a day on Instagram. Why aren't you posting 4 times a day? That's the only insight. So I changed it. Now I post 4 times a day and my social media grew 7 times, right? So that's the key. That's the one insight. Alex Hormozy, what's the one insight? It's don't see people as your competition because if your goal is to truly make a difference in the world, the person younger than you should beat you. And I was like, wow, that really like gave me goosebumps when I heard that. I was like, Alex is right. Like if my goal is to make the industry better, technically when I'm old, the guy younger than me should eventually beat me, or else I didn't make the world a better place. I wasn't generous enough. So that's the insight I've implemented. But if you do that with 100 different thought leaders, that's when you see the magic of implementation. So just implement 1 or 2 things per thought leader. That's it. And you only go to the next insight if you implemented the first one.
Amazing. That's so amazing. And that's true as well when you are consuming like a podcast and maybe a book. So really make sure that you have that information, like at least one key insight because it's gonna be long, right? A book is, you know, so big and so much knowledge to get from it. And podcasts tend to be like very long as well. So yeah, keeping like at least one insight from them would really help out a lot. And now that we're into the execution part, I want to also talk about like consistency because everyone says that consistency is the key, but not everyone can be consistent, right? It's hard. And for me, even for me, it's really hard. But if it was easy, then everyone could have been successful, right? But for you, how are you able to develop like discipline and really stick with it apart from because for us, right, we know that we really love doing this thing, so it's easier or like at least it's going to make the burden less heavy for us to it's not like a drag, right? That's not the feeling that we get because we love doing what we're doing. We're passionate about something, so we just keep on doing it. But of course, there are things that you want to improve that you have to get out of your comfort zone and you want to be consistent. So in your case, how are you able to develop discipline and really make sure you can stick with it?
Absolutely. And let me be upfront, Rem. There's a lot of things that I do that I actually don't like doing. Like, I don't really like creating content. And the reason I do it is because I really want to impact people who can't afford me. I love doing this, though. This is fun. Like, being on a podcast is super fun. I meant more like long form YouTube videos. I don't like that. Like, sitting there and scripting it and all that stuff is so much of my mental energy, but I know it leaves a legacy that's important, so I do it. So I actually don't think I'm that consistent as a person. I just think the systems that I have in my life beat my inconsistent habits. Let me give you an example. Like in workouts, I'm not very consistent, right? I'll do one or two. But social media, I'm probably one of the most consistent people in the world right now on Instagram. Like, I've been posting 4 times a day for the last 5 months. I think I might have missed one day where I posted 3 times a day. But why is that? But it's not because Brenden is sitting there making 4 posts a day. It's because I created a system that allows me to post in advance. Example, let me explain this in layman terms. I call this create twice but post once. So post once but create twice. Let's say you want to post daily on LinkedIn, right? Example. But you make 2 posts a day. So on day one, you write 2 LinkedIn posts, but you post one, which takes an extra 20 minutes, let's say. But if you do the same thing tomorrow, post once, create twice, you're 2 days ahead. And if you keep doing that for 6 months, you're 6 months ahead of your content strategy. You could do nothing for 6 months and you could always keep posting daily. That's what I rely on. So whenever I'm building something, Ren, I always just ask myself, what is the best way to win here? So example on Instagram, I actually repurpose all my content every 100 days. So on the 100th day, I start reposting from day one. Nobody notices because it's 400 posts later, right? That's it. So I don't think of, oh no, I need to be consistent for the rest of my life. That's too much pressure. I just go, oh, I need to make 400 pieces of content. If I make 400 pieces of content, I could post 4 times a day for the rest of my life. That's the way I think about it. So the best way to stay consistent is to break down your goals into little bits and pieces and tackle just a little bit more than usual, and you'll be more consistent than everyone else. In the same way, I've been active on LinkedIn for like, I haven't missed a day in like
Yeah.
years. I don't think so.
Yeah, for sure. And also it's going back to the execution part, right? Because if you don't execute, then there's not going to be a lot of content that you have that you can post and really use for yourself and for your content, right? So it's really about creating and sticking with it and really just putting things out there. And to your point, right? Me personally, I used to not like reading books. Like if I find it, because I'm a very visual learner, if I find that it's too wordy, or I really hated writing before. So yeah, if I find that it's too wordy, I'm not going to like just read it. But now because I'm really interested about learning and I have like a growth mindset now that I want to like acquire more knowledge as much as I can. I just find myself, picking up books and just reading them. And then also, you're right, like systems really beat um motivation, or or lack thereof, because once you keep on doing something, you're able to develop processes for yourself, and you're gonna have a system that you can easily stick with, and it's gonna become part of your habit, right? So I think that's what happened to you as well. So now it became like part of your habit. So yeah, so also apart from like, learning from thought leaders and learning how we can like further develop ourselves. So I want to brush off on like regarding communication. So because here's the interesting thing, right? Usually introverts, they are having a hard time, or it's challenging for them to want to speak in a crowd, in front of a crowd. But you personally, would you say that you're an introvert or extrovert?
I'm probably an ambivert, like most
Ah,
people, where it's
ambivert.
like, or it's
Ah,
which just means for the audience, I'm extroverted, but I also like
mm,
being alone. Like there's
yeah,
some days I just block off, and I just don't talk to anybody.
yeah.
I'm an ambivert.
Yeah. So yeah, so personally for me, I think I'm really introverted, and I really find, public speaking challenging, or to speak in front of a crowd is really daunting for me. But it's something that I want to overcome. I really want to share knowledge as well to other people, share insights, share the things that I've learned from, the top thought leaders that are out there. And people ask me too, like my friends ask me too, so I want to become like someone who's better at sharing that, and for them to easily learn it, because anybody can talk, right? But they cannot talk better. So for you, what's your advice to someone who's really introverted, who wants to become better at communication, or just really improve, their communication aspect?
Yeah, for sure, Rem. So there's a couple of different things for introverts specifically, but I'll just use this opportunity to share 3 tips that everyone should do, including introverts. So number one is the random word exercise. Take any word, like phone or screen or watch or time or podcast, and create random presentations out of thin air. So if you take the word pencil, do a 60-second presentation on pencil. And if you're introverted, just do this alone in your home. You don't need other people watching you do this. But what's nice about the exercise, Rem, is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. So if you talk about like avocado toast and nuts and light bulb, you can talk about anything really, really well. So my encouragement is do this a few times a day. So for those of you listening who have children, do this with your kids. If you have nieces and nephews, do it with them. Do this with your family. Do this with the people in your life. That's exercise one. Exercise two is question drills. So make a list of questions that people ask you in job interviews, in your life, and just answer one of them every day with a free voice recorder app on your phone. Very simple. Just open up your phone and just go, hey, boom, let's do this. And just voice out your answer. So, for example, everybody should be practicing, tell me about yourself. Because you're being asked that at life in a job interview all the time. But if you practice that a few times, you'll be really good. Number three, which is going to be a little scary for introverts, so do it last, do the first two. Just send birthday video messages to people you love. So I have a little Google Calendar that tells me whose birthday it is. People that are really close to me, business partners, clients, people who are big supporters of my work. And I send them a birthday video message on their birthday. And I just go, hey, happy birthday. Hope you're having a great day. So those are my 3 tips.
All right, awesome. And I received one of those too.
There you go.
and, and my birthday. Actually, it's the first time that I received that. That's very personalized, and I think it's a really great idea, because you might think that, oh, people are, greeting them on their birthday. And it's not new, right? But it's really special, because you don't know, right? Maybe they're really not getting those specialized video messages. So yeah, it's very thoughtful. So yeah, I want to dig deep as well into like what you've mentioned that really stood out to me, which is, if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So right right? So when you're typically when you're talking about something or doing like a presentation or talking about it, what sometimes what happens is that like words get jumbled, and then at some point like you lose the momentum is I think what the key part of it. So do you have like an advice on structure maybe when it comes to like doing this sort of presentation or explaining something, right? Because I really wanted to I'm really trying as well like storytelling and that type of format, but sometimes in certain situations it ends up being too long, or maybe it loses its momentum along the way, that like the other person kind of um don't think it's making any sense anymore. So yeah, what's your advice on that, or do you have like a certain structure that we can easily follow when it comes to explaining things?
For sure, Rem. So I'll keep it really simple. There's many different frameworks, but I think the easy one to follow, especially with telling stories, like with a personal friend or something, is the people make the mistake of not starting with the lesson first. Example, and I'm sure you might have felt that in your country, where somebody comes to your house, knocks on the door, whether you live in Manila and or somewhere else, it doesn't matter. Manila, I mean, or somewhere else, and they go, Rem, I have a great story for you. You go, great. And then 20 minutes later, they're still talking. You're going, where's the story going? Like, what's the point of what they're saying? So the reason I bring that up is because the reason they keep going is because they don't know what the key outcome is. And that's the problem. So what you need to always do before you communicate a message is you have to ask yourself, what's the point? What's the point that I want to drive? You start there. And then you build a story around the point. You build a story around the point. Okay. So, for example, when you ask me the passion question, my get to the point is don't focus on your passion, focus on something that gives you money, and then focus on passions later. That's my key outcome. But then what's the story or the concept that I bring to explain that outcome? In this case, it was Gade Hendrix's zone of genius model, where I talked about the four boxes and I walked you through to get to my point. Whereas a lot of people, what they do is they just go, oh, like I learned this, but there's no point to it. So I'd encourage you to start writing those things down and start practicing one point at a time.
All right, that's amazing. So that's something that I can also like do the exercise myself. All right. So, actually, at this point, I think we've pretty much covered everything. And at this point, I want to go into the rapid fire questions. So, I just have three questions that I ask every guest towards the end. So the first question is something that I also ask my teammates and other people as well, which I think was very beneficial. Is what is the most recent key takeaway that you've discovered in your life so far, and you know, what's this lesson that you can never forget?
Beautiful, beautiful question. What's a recent one? I'll give you what comes off the top of my head right now, Rem, which is focusing on short form content. So if you asked me 2 years ago, hey, how's your real strategy or TikTok? I would have said, like, why should I make TikToks? Like, most of my audience watches 8-minute videos. This stuff doesn't make any sense. But I later realized in life, now that I'm a TikTok addict, how valuable short form content is because it allows you to discover people really fast. So now when I listen to a podcast, I actually go through the clips first. And only if I like the clips, I'll listen to the full episode, right? Just because I want to know if the insights are valuable for
Yeah.
my time. So now if you ask me what my social media strategy is, now it's 90% short form content.
Mm.
So that's something I was wrong on, which unfortunately for me, if I had changed my mind earlier, I'd already have a million followers across most of my social media. But that's okay. It's okay. But that's a big lesson that I learned recently, is to take short form more seriously.
Yeah, it's never too late too, because that's it's the same for me as well. I tend to watch a lot of these clips just because I'm already following them from the get go, or they just get recommended to me, and then from there, I usually would watch more than five or more than 10 before I decide to, oh, maybe I should listen to one of these episodes, right? And with my observation, it tends to happen to other people too. Like when I see them consuming content, they're also seeing these podcast clips, And that's how they're discovering and starting to listen to podcasts when before they totally didn't do it, right? So yeah, and also it's great that you have like videos already, because this economy is shifting towards video, really, especially with the rise of like AI and everything that you can just generate. So it's more personalized, and it makes you feel like more human and more connected to this person. So the next question is, can you share like a book, a resource, or a podcast that you're listening to right now that you think the audience might find value in as well?
Yeah, for sure, Ram. I'll recommend my favorite book of all time, which is Thirst by Scott Harrison. Thirst by Scott Harrison. Scott Harrison's the CEO and founder of Charity Water. He basically helps people gain access to clean drinking water, and he's raised hundreds of millions of dollars for his nonprofit. I think the guy's exceptional. His story is amazing because he went from being a nightclub promoter in New York City to building the most important water charity in the entire world. And he's a phenomenal storyteller. I think he's one of the best in the world right now. And I actually learned a lot of my storytelling tips from him just by watching him navigate his life. So I encourage that book. And my favorite quote from the book is by Pope Francis, and he says, "All it takes in the world to have hope is one person, and why can't that person just be you?"
Wow, that's so amazing. And I think I've heard of that person before, and also his book Thirst, which is so interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned that, so I can have something in my, I can add something new to my to read list. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And next question is, if you could nominate someone else to be on the show, to be on this podcast, who do you think would be a great guest that would share like amazing life experiences?
Is that somebody I know or somebody just in general?
I think somebody. It could be either. It's up to you.
Sure, sure, sure. I mean, in this case, I'd recommend my business partner, right? I think Vamsi is an
I was thinking
incredible
that.
guy, and he's my hero. So, and I'm happy to make an intro if you want to if you want him on the show.
Amazing. All right. So totally. So for Vamsi, I know we've mentioned him a lot, so we'll make sure to include the link to him, so you can see like who's this person like, right? What's this person like? And yeah, so that's very exciting, and I would totally appreciate that. So before we wrap up though, can you tell us, where do you want the audience to see more of you? Where can they learn more from you?
Yeah, absolutely, Ram. This is really fun, by the way. Thanks for having me on the show. So obviously, I got a bunch of different social medias, but I would say the most popular one is probably YouTube. So just go to MasterTalk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. You can also Google the word MasterTalk, and you'll find me pretty fast. That's one way to keep in touch. The second way is you can attend one of my free workshops that you've attended, right? I do a free communication workshop every 2 weeks over Zoom. That's just free for the world. You could be from anywhere, any title, just jump in, have fun. And that's rockstarcommunicator.com.
All right, so actually I've attended this before, and it's amazing because you guys also like do these in person, which is like not a lot of these workshops are right now. They would usually be recorded, so it's amazing that people can interact with you and also practice with you guys, because at first I felt like it could be daunting, but knowing that there's some people that can help you practice and can provide you more information really helps. It really helps a lot. So yeah, so I think that's pretty much it, and we've covered the questions, the most important questions that we have for you today, Brandon. I just want to say like thank you so much for being on this show, even though like this podcast is so new, it's fairly new, and right now the upload frequency is not a lot, but hopefully moving forward we can have you back with more guests on the show, and also I'm getting like recommendations as well, so that I know like who to have on the show next time. So yeah, I really appreciate your time, and I really wish you all the best. And as you mentioned before, people are not gonna be surprising you successful, because you're absolutely crushing it out there. And yeah, so for all the listeners, all of the resources and the links that we mentioned earlier, the thought leaders as well, will be in the show notes if you want to check them. If you want to check them out, but also please be sure to check out Brendan And if you want to be a guest or to share your own story, go to thepivotchronicles.com. So that's it for today, and see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Pivot Chronicles podcast. If you want to share your own story, go to thepivotchronicles.com. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So connect with me on Instagram at rem_ortega_. I'm looking forward to talking with you. See you in the next episode.